In structural engineering, we are taught to respect the physics of failure. We talk often of fatigue life, the number of stress cycles a component can endure before a microscopic crack begins to propagate. We are trained to look for the invisible warnings, the silent shifts in a foundation that signal a catastrophic collapse is imminent. For 31 years, I worked out of Hamilton, Ontario, calculating load tolerances for bridges and high-rises. I understood how much weight a beam could carry before it buckled. I spent my life obsessed with the integrity of steel and concrete, yet I failed to apply that same analytical rigor to the people under my own roof. That was the most significant design flaw of my life, and it nearly cost me everything. My wife, Patricia, was the bedrock of my existence. We had been married for 34 years, a duration I considered to be structurally sound. She was a woman of quiet resilience, a retired teacher who found peace in her garden and her books. She was not someone who complained or exaggerated, so when she mentioned in late September that she felt a persistent dizziness and a strange pounding rhythm in her heart, I should have listened with the same intensity I brought to a site inspection. Instead, I dismissed it. I told her it was likely stress or perhaps the natural progression of age. I kissed her forehead and went back to my blueprints, leaving the most important person in my life to face a growing instability alone. That was the first point of failure. I ignored the data because it was inconvenient to my schedule. Patricia had one brother, Clifford Marsh. If Patricia was the reinforced core of the family, Clifford was the decorative facade, charming to look at but lacking any real structural substance. He had drifted through life, never holding a job for long, always relying on his easy smile to bridge the gaps in his character. My wife loved him with a protective, older sibling devotion that blinded her to his rot. We owned a cottage on Georgian Bay, a property inherited from her parents that had appreciated to nearly $1 million. Clifford had made comments about that cottage for years, small jokes about the lucky sister that I had stored away as mere background noise. I didn't realize those comments were the sound of a pressure valve starting to hiss. He was a man who saw other people's assets as his own potential relief fund. By October, the erosion of Patricia's health accelerated. She was nauseous every morning, her weight dropping as if she were being hollowed out from the inside. Our daughter Renee called me from Guelph, her voice sharp with an anxiety I hadn't yet allowed myself to feel. She told me her mother sounded foggy, like her cognitive functions were slipping. I promised to pay more attention, but my mind was occupied with a bridge project in Burlington. I was too busy building connections for others to notice the one failing in my own home. I was analyzing tension and shear force in steel while a different kind of force was tearing my wife's health apart. What I didn't know was that Clifford had been inside my house nearly every day. He had offered to help with the chores I was too busy to handle, cleaning the gutters, checking the window seals, pruning the hedges. I had even thanked him for it. I had invited the corrosive element into the heart of the structure. He was coming by under the guise of family loyalty, while secretly dismantling my wife's life. My wife trusted him. She had known him since he was a child. To her, he was a load-bearing wall, but in reality, he was a termite. The turning point occurred on a Wednesday in mid-November. I returned home early, driven back by a headache that felt like a structural crack. Clifford's truck was in the driveway. Inside, I found him in the kitchen, hovering over a pot of tea while Patricia sat at the table, looking like a ghost of her former self. He was too relaxed, too at home. My engineering instincts, dormant for so long in my personal life, finally flared. I saw a mismatch in the data. The way he watched her take a sip of that tea wasn't the look of a caring brother. It was the look of an inspector checking the progress of a demolition. It was a cold, analytical gaze that mirrored my own professional stare. I am a man who relies on evidence. I don't act on feelings. I act on measurements. That Friday, I installed a small discrete camera in the living room disguised as a common smoke detector. I told myself it was to monitor Patricia's health while I was at work, to see if she was falling or confused. I was lying to myself. I was conducting a forensic audit of my brother-in-law. The surveillance was a diagnostic tool, meant to confirm or deny the presence of a threat. The revelation came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in a parking lot in Burlington, checking the feed on my phone. I watched Clifford enter the kitchen. He checked the hallway to ensure Patricia was resting. Then, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small vial. I watched him open Patricia's iron supplement bottle and tip a white powder into the capsules. My hands began to shake with a violent intensity I had never known. In that moment, the entire structure of my reality collapsed. I wasn't watching a family member. I was watching a predator systematically poisoning his own sister for the sake of a piece of land on Georgian Bay. He was thinning her blood and attacking her nerves, all for the price of a lakefront view. I didn't call him. I didn't scream. I called Patricia and told her in the firmest voice I could muster to stop taking her supplements until I got home. I made up a lie about a pharmaceutical recall to keep her calm. Then, I sat in my car and breathed until the world stopped spinning. I realized that Clifford had been playing a long game, making her sick slowly enough to look like natural decline, intending to eventually secure power of attorney and sell the cottage to cover his mounting debts. It was a calculated, cold-blooded plan that relied on my inattention and her love. I drove home, collected the tainted bottle in a Ziploc bag, and took Patricia to the hospital. The police were involved within the hour. The toxicological report was a list of horrors, compounds that cause progressive neurological damage, introduced in doses that were meant to incapacitate, not kill, at least not immediately. Clifford was arrested that same night. The investigation revealed he was drowning in debt, the kind that comes from a lifetime of bad choices and desperate gambles. He had been looking for a shortcut to solvency, and he didn't care if his sister's life was the price. Patricia spent weeks in recovery. The fog cleared, but the damage to her trust remains a permanent scar. We still have the cottage, but we don't go there as often. The views are the same, but the foundation feels compromised. I have spent my career ensuring that bridges don't fall, but I learned too late that the most dangerous loads are the ones we carry in our hearts. Trust is not the same as inattention. Love is not the same as looking away. I am an engineer who failed to inspect his own life, and I will spend the rest of my years making up for that oversight. Pay attention to your house, not just the walls, but the people who walk through them. Because by the time you see the cracks, the collapse has already begun, and you must decide if you have the strength to rebuild what was lost. Vigilance is the price of safety, and love is only as strong as the integrity of those we let inside.